In this 20-second video of 25 days of Flutter, we are going to add authentication to our app. So the first thing that we want to do is inside of our screens folder, go ahead and create a new file called Wrapper.dart. And we're going to point the home to the wrapper page, and this will decide if the user is logged in, and if they are, it'll send them to the home page, and if they're not, it'll send them to the login and sign up page. And then we also need another file. We're going to call this one Authentication.dart, and that will be a service. So go ahead and inside live, create a new folder, services, and then create a new file, Authentication.dart. And this is where some of our auth methods will live. So we'll come back to this authentication file. For now, we're going to work in Wrapper. This will be a stateful widget, and we'll call it Wrapper. Make sure to grab our material.dart package, and we're going to create a constructor and pass in this.auth. And then we need to say final base auth, and this is imported from the authentication file. So inside of here, we're going to import two things. First, we're going to import Dart async. Secondly, we need to import the Firebase auth package. So we'll say import package Firebase _auth / Firebase _auth.dart. And it's not finding that because we need to add that to our pubspec.yaml. So we'll go ahead and copy and paste that into there. Now, after we run pub.get right here, flutter pub get, this should find it. Perfect. Now below here, we're going to create a class called base auth, but it's going to be abstract. So we're going to define our methods. So we'll say abstract class base auth. Now if we go back in here, we should be able to do quick fix and import that. And we're going to create a couple of different methods in here, but the one we need now is get current user. This will have a return type of future user get current user. And this user object is coming directly from the Firebase auth package. So if you go inside the documentation, you can read more about that. And then below here, we're going to create a class auth, which will implement the methods inside of base auth. Now we're getting an error because we need to create that one override, which is get current user. And we don't need this override. Awesome. Before we implement this method, the first thing we need to do is get an instance of our Firebase auth. So we'll say final Firebase auth. We'll call this _Firebase auth is equal to Firebase auth.instance. Perfect. And just a quick note, this user and the Firebase auth, I believe they just recently changed. So if you're looking for other sources to help you with your project other than this video, just be aware of that. If you're looking at any older videos, you're going to have to change this. All right, now let's do this get current user method. It's going to be pretty simple. We're going to define our user credential. That will be equal to Firebase auth.current user. And then we're just going to return that user credential. And this needs to be async. Yep, here we go. So we have return type of future. So we need to make this asynchronous. Now we can go back inside of our wrapper class and continue working here. So above our class wrapper state, we're going to create an enum. And this will be for auth status. And this is similar to the form enum we created. And we have a few things in here. We have not determined. We have not logged in, and we have logged in. So this is pretty simple how this will work. If it's not determined, we will show the user the loading screen. If they are not logged in, we will send the user to the login signup page. And if they're logged in, we'll send the user to the home page. Now inside of the wrapper state class, let's get a reference to our auth status. So we'll say auth status. Auth status is equal, and we'll set it to not determined at first. And we also need a string which will hold our user ID. Initially, this will be empty. And then when we log in the user, we're going to set this variable to their unique user ID. And Firebase gives every user a unique user ID. It's called UID. Below here, we're going to create an init state method. First, we'll say override void init state. Inside of here, we're going to first call super.init state, and then we need to get the current user. So we're going to say widget.auth.getCurrentUser. That is the method that we just made. Then with that user, we're going to say if the user is not equal to null, set the user ID equal to that user's UID. And then we're going to say auth status. And we want to set this equal to not logged in or logged in. So we need to check. We'll say user ID is equal to null. If that is true, the auth status is not logged in. Else, the auth status is logged in. And this is UID. There we go. And be sure to end this with a colon. And all of this should actually be inside of a set state. So go ahead, copy this. We'll do set state, and then paste it inside of there. Awesome. So make sure that is looking like mine. And then down below here, just like we did with the form, we need two methods, on logged in and on signed out. And inside of those methods, we're going to do two things. We're going to reset the user ID. So either changing the user ID to the user's ID, or if they're logging out, change it to an empty string. And then two, we need to change the auth status enum. So we'll say void on logged in. So when the user logs in, we're going to do the same stuff we did here. So I'm actually just going to copy this, paste it inside of here. So widget.auth.getCurrentUser then user set the state. We're just going to remove this if, and we're going to say user ID is equal to user. Don't need the question mark. That was just for some error handling in case it was null. User.uid.toString. Remove this auth status. And then outside of here, we'll say set state auth status is equal to auth status dot logged in. And then we need another one for on signed out. And then to handle the last one, the not determined, we need a waiting screen. So let's just go ahead and build out that widget because it's pretty simple. Build waiting screen, and we're just going to return a scaffold. Awesome, that will just indicate to the user that we are loading. And the final thing we have to do is change this build method. So inside of here, don't actually need this. We're going to remove that. And we're going to have a switch. And what we're going to say, this will be auth status. We're going to have a couple different cases in here. So the first case will be auth status dot not determined. If that is the case, return the waiting screen and break. The next case will be not logged in. And for that, we want to return the login sign up. There we go, the login sign up page. And that is this page here. And we need to pass in some parameters here. We're going to set the auth to widget.auth, and then on signed in, set that equal to underscore on logged in. So let's go ahead and add these to the login signup page. For this, we will need to create a constructor, login. Inside of here, we're going to say this dot auth, comma, this dot on signed in. Create those. Final base auth. Again, that's coming from our authentication file here. And then final void callback on signed in. Let's import this file. And if we go back here, let's remove those. Perfect. Again, we don't want to add the parentheses because we don't want to invoke that method at build, only when we hit this case. Okay, so that is this case. Finally, we'll break. And then the last case will be auth status.loggedin. And for this, we're going to create a check here. We're going to say if user ID dot length is greater than 0 and user ID is not equal to null. If that's true, go ahead and return the home page. And again, we're going to pass in the auth, which will be widget.auth, the user ID. The user ID will be underscore user ID. And on signed out, we're going to call this method. And home page is not defined. Let's see, what did we call that? Home screen. And we'll keep this file open too because we're going to have to add this. All right, so let's go ahead and import home screen. There we go. Now we're getting errors here. And that's fine. Let's just open up our home screen. And right below the class home screen, we are going to say home screen, pass in a key, this dot auth, this dot user ID, and this dot on signed out. And then we'll say super key. Let's create all of those. Final base auth, final void callback on signed out, and final string user ID. Import the auth file, and there we go. no errors here. And when all this is not true, we're going to just say else and return the waiting screen. So build waiting screen and break. And then we'll set the default to just return the build waiting screen. And that's it for the wrapper class. Alright, so we finally added our entire wrapper class. We're doing the correct checks, and we're setting them to either the home screen or the login sign up screen. And we have our authentication file, which has currently only one method, but we'll add more to that, which is getting the current user. The last thing to do to actually make this work is to go inside of main.dart, and if the connection state is done, we don't want to return the success text. We want to set the child to that wrapper. So let's go ahead and do that. Say wrapper, and the auth is auth. And let's go ahead and import that auth file, format this up, and now if I open up my terminal, I was running the app inside of here. If I do a hard refresh, there we go. So we're sent to the login screen because we don't have an account. So we went through here. The case was not logged in, so they sent us to this page. And then as you see, we can interact with this page just like we did in the video when we built it. So this is good, but we still can't do anything on this page. We can't log in or create an account. So let's go ahead and do that. So inside of the login sign up page, all the UI is built. So all we need to do is implement the logic for actually logging in and signing up a user. So the method we're going to be working in is the validate and submit. So right now, if the user enters an email and a password that's valid and hits create an account or they hit login, we're just simply pushing on the home screen to the navigator without actually logging them in. So let's go ahead and remove both of this. There we go. So now we are not doing anything. So let's first work on the create a new user. But the first thing we're going to want to do is wrap all of this in a try catch loop. Here we go. Alright, there we go. Pretty simple. So try to log the user in. If you can't catch and print the error. And we're actually going to do some error checking inside of here too. That is Firebase specific. So how we log people in, let me go back to the docs briefly. This here is how you create a user. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to copy this and we're just going to paste it inside of here. Now if I hover over this, we need to import the Firebase auth package. So if I actually run this, it will work. So let me go ahead and refresh this. There we go. And we need to first go to your Firebase project and in the Authentication tab, hit Get Started. This will actually enable authentication for the project. And there's a bunch of different ways you can authenticate. We're going to want to go ahead and uncheck email and password. Let's go ahead and click Enable, Save. Now we should be good. So if we go to users, there are no users. But if we go into our app, go to the create an account, hit anything, and hit create an account. So after you do that, we don't have anything happening in our app, but if we go to our authentication and refresh, we should see that account was created. And actually, if we go back into our terminal here and we do a hard refresh, we should be sent to the home screen. There we go, because we are now logged in. But the first problem we have to fix is we're now on the home page and there's no way to log out. So we're going to go ahead and implement that logout feature and then come back to this. So let's open up Authentication.dart and we're going to make a function called signout. Just make it up here first. We'll say future void, because there is no return type, sign out. Now we're getting an error here because we need to implement this. We'll say future type void sign out. This will be asynchronous. And signing out is very simple. All we're going to do is return Firebase auth dot sign out. And that is all there is to it. Now we can call this from the home screen. So what we're going to do is we're going to make this button here, open settings, and then we're going to create a button in there that will allow you to log out. So we have the button here, and on press right now we're not doing anything. Let's change that. We'll say open settings, and we'll come down here and we'll make that right down here. We'll say void open settings. We'll say navigator dot of context dot push a material page route. The builder will be build context and we're going to return a scaffold. Inside of this scaffold, we should be able to test that out. If we refresh here, there we go, we get the scaffold. We're going to give it an app bar. And for the body, I'm going to go ahead and paste some code because this is just basic UI. We have some padding, we have a column, then we have a raise button, and on the raise button, we're going to sign out. So we're going to pop the context, but we also need to call our sign out function right here. So we're going to say underscore sign out, and we need to go ahead and create this. So we'll go right above the opening settings. We'll say sign out, asynchronous. We'll say try, await, widget dot auth dot sign out, and then we need to call widget dot on signed out, and then we're just going to catch any errors and print that. There we go. We're going to have to go swipe to get away from that page, and then we'll do a refresh. Now if we open this up, there we go. We get our settings, sign out, and if we hit this, we sign out. And the wrapper is sending us back to the login screen. So that's pretty cool. All right, let's go back to the login sign up page and let's work on finishing up this validate and submit. So the first thing to do, we need to change this email from the hard-coded email to the email that's passed in. Remember, we have that right here, email and password. So we'll use that by saying email and password. Perfect. So next, what we need to do is we need to create a string for our user ID. So inside of here, we're going to say string user ID, initialize it to empty, And then down here, when we log in successfully, we're going to set the user ID equal to the user credential dot, and as you see, we have some properties on this. We have a user property dot, then we can get a bunch of information. So we can get the display name, email, phone number, photo URL. This is, of course, if we have it. So if the user was authenticated through Google, we have some of that. But we want the UID. And then everything else is good. So we won't get any errors if the user tries to log in with any of these. But we need to have a way to actually show the user what the error is, if there's an error. So for that, we're going to show an alert box. Again, to save some time, I'm going to paste this in. This is it. So it's a widget called show error or success dialog. It takes in the message title and the message text, both type string. We're using this show dialog from Flutter, and we are simply returning an alert dialog widget. The title is the message title, the content is the message text, and what we're saying is if the message title is equal to success, which we'll set that up here, we're going to change the form to login. So if we are able to create the user, we're going to show that dialog. The title will be success, and the text will be please log in with the username and password you just created. And success is, in this title, success is the only time we're going to be using that. And if you go back down here, this onPressed, this is why we have this check. So if the message title is success, that means they successfully created an account. So change the form to login so they can now log in with that information. And then pop the context. Awesome. So we need this again. So if there's an error of weak password, we're going to show that dialog, the message text. Let's just say weak password. So that's all there is to do to create a new user. And to log the user in, it's going to be similar. Basically the exact same, except instead of calling create user with email and password, we're going to call sign in user with email and password. So let's do our try. If there's an error, print the error to the debug console, and then also we're going to show that to the user. And then inside of our try, we are going to log in. So we'll copy this, paste it here. We'll call sign in with email and password, passing in our email and password as what was passed in to us. And then we don't want to show any information there because it will simply be brought to the home page. But we're going to catch some errors on Firebase auth exception catch E. And then I'm going to paste some stuff directly from their website. So if the code is user not found, show that to the user. And if the code is wrong password, show that to the user. And again, these codes can all be found in the documentation, and the snippet actually, like I showed you earlier, can be found directly on their website. And lastly, we want to set the user ID equal to the user credential dot user dot UID, just like we did in the create an account part. So now that's all done, but we haven't used the user ID yet. So go down below all of this, and right below all of that, we're going to say if user ID dot length is greater than 0, meaning we changed it from the empty string to the user's UID, and user ID is not equal to null for any reason, and form mode dot login, and form mode is equal to form mode dot login. If all of that is true, we're going to call widget dot on signed in, which, as you recall, brings us to the home page by changing the state. So with all of that, we should be ready to test this out. So let me go ahead and give this a hard restart. Here we are on the login page. Let's first try to create an account. Let's test some of this error handling. So first, we'll do nothing. There we go. If I do test at test.com and I say PA, so this would be an invalid password. I create an account. We get weak password. Awesome. Maybe we'll try password 123. Create an account. We get success. Please log in with the username and password you just created. If I hit dismiss, that brings us to the login page. And if we go back here and refresh, we see that email coming through. And we should see that in our terminal as well. There we go. So we get that text printed out. And then to log in, we'll say test at test.com, password 123. And actually, if I go up here in this space, there's now a space behind it. We have .strip being called, so that shouldn't affect anything. Let's log in, and there we go. We logged in. Now I can also sign out. And now if I try to create a new account with that same email, random letters, it should say this email is already being used. Awesome. So that's it for this video, guys. And in the next video, we are going to look at how we can interact with a database using Cloud Firestore.